Another nail biter. Lindsay said, no, I'm only the 50. Looking at my phone. Do something. That's from here. Okay, thank you. I guess on anything, even on reconciliation, point of order or something, with the signature.
United States Senate Committee on Foreign Relations will come to order. This morning we're going to do two things. We're going to have business meeting and voting on 5 nominees, and then we're going to proceed to the hearing on State Department reorganization. So with that, we will start with, we've agreed that we're going to have a roll call vote on each of these. So we'll start with the nomination of John. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Senator Sheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to briefly point out that all of the appointees this morning are political appointees. Obviously, every president has the right to nominate whoever they like, but I think it's notable that we're 6 months into the administration, and the committee has only received 4 career nominees, none of whom have moved forward. And given the personnel cuts and the lack of Senate-confirmed ambassadors at posts where China is active, I hope that we will advance those career nominees. I hope Secretary Rubio and the White House are listening, and that they will prioritize those career nominees so we can get people on their posts throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sheen. And I think,
Mr. Chairman,
excuse me, just a second, Senator Cornyn. I think the criticism that we need to move the career people, more career people, is well taken. Obviously, the president does have the ability to move the political ones, but with all due respect, we're having a little trouble moving them on the floor anyway. We're backed up 90, so that's my criticism. But look, I have made specific requests that we move more career, because at least we ought to make the team, the president's team, as big as we can, where we have modest agreement on who should hold those seats. So thank you for that, Senator Cornyn.
Mr. Chairman, you made my point. If our Democratic friends would simply cooperate more with us on expediting the confirmation of non-controversial nominees across the floor, we could get a whole lot more people on post. It's really important to have the president's representative as a U.S. ambassador in a number of these countries around the country, and this is not doing anything except delaying those, and it's hurting the country. And I just wish our colleagues would do what traditionally we've done, and that is to agree to voice votes or to expedite non-controversial nominees. I understand they're going to pick their fights, and more power to them, but I think it's a two-way street, and I wish they would take that to heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Of course, Senator Sheen.
Well, certainly I have been one of those who has urged that we move nominees to ambassadorships around the world as expeditiously as possible, and urge people to vote against them if you don't like them, but we need to move these people so we can get them on post. I would hope that maybe we could agree that if we have a number of career ambassadors, we can move them and think about who else we might be able to move as part of that package. But I would hope that we would make an effort to do this on both sides of the aisle. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I have discussed that with the president, with State Department and others. That the more we get, the easier it is to make a deal to move them along. And we're going to continue to try to do that and move them as quickly as we can. Thank you, everybody, for your thoughts on that. So let's move to the first nom. Johnny Sinha, Florida, to be ambassador of the United States of America to the Republic of Singapore. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. It's been moved and seconded that the committee send Mr. Sinha to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Is there debate? There being no Senator Shaheen.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I intend to vote against Dr. Sinha. I think that there are a lot of nominees who face a learning curve on diplomacy, and that's understandable, and I've supported many of those who take their responsibility seriously. But what we saw at the hearing for Mr. Sinha was that he had failed to do his homework. That's not going to serve the United States well, representing Singapore, which is important to the United States. So I intend to vote against him.
Thank you, Senator. Further debate? There being no further debate, clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Ricketts?
Aye.
Mr. McCormick?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines?
Aye.
Mr. Haggerty?
Aye.
Mr. Barrasso? Mr. Lee? Mr. Paul? Mr. Cruz?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Scott?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Curtis? Mr. Cornyn? Mrs. Shaheen?
No.
Mr. Coons?
No.
Mr. Murphy? No. Mr. Kane?
No.
Mr. Merkley? No. Mr. Booker?
No by proxy.
No by proxy. Do we have proxies for Senator Booker?
Mr. Schatz?
Thank you. No by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen?
No by proxy.
Ms. Duckworth?
No by proxy.
Ms. Rosen?
Yes. I mean, no.
It's easy to get caught up in the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I know the feeling.
It's affecting the entire diocese.
Clerk will report if that's possible.
Mr. Chairman, I need your vote.
Oh, aye.
Mr. Chairman, the yeas are 12, the nays are 10.
Motion's passed. The nomination will be sent to the floor. We now have Mr. Jeffrey Bartos of Pennsylvania to be representative of the United Nations of America to the United Nations for UN Management and Reform with the rank of ambassador. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Been moved and seconded. We send Mr. Bartos to the floor with the due pass recommendation. Is there debate? If there be no debate, the clerk will call a roll.
Mr. Ricketts?
Aye.
Mr. McCormick?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines?
Aye.
Mr. Haggerty?
Aye.
Mr. Barrasso? Mr. Lee? Mr. Paul? Mr. Cruz?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Scott?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Curtis? Mr. Cornyn? Mrs. Shaheen?
Aye.
Mr. Coons?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
No.
Mr. Kane? Mr. Merkley? Mr. Booker?
No by proxy.
Mr. Schatz?
No by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen?
No by proxy.
Ms. Duckworth?
No by proxy.
Ms. Rosen?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye. Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, the yeas are 15, the noes are 7.
The motion has passed. Mr. Bartos will be sent to the floor with the due pass recommendation. Now we have Linda Blanchard of Alabama to be U.S. Representative of the United Nations Agencies for Food and Agriculture with the rank of ambassador. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Second? It's been moved and seconded. Is there debate? There be no debate. Clerk will call a roll.
Mr. Ricketts?
Aye.
Mr. McCormick?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines?
Aye.
Mr. Haggerty?
Aye.
Mr. Barrasso? Mr. Lee? Mr. Paul? Mr. Cruz?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Scott?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Curtis? Mr. Cornyn? Mrs. Shaheen?
And no.
Mr. Coons?
No.
Mr. Murphy?
No.
Mr. Kane?
No.
Mr. Merkley? Mr. Booker?
No by proxy.
Mr. Schatz?
No by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen?
No by proxy.
Ms. Duckworth?
No by proxy.
Ms. Rosen?
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the yeas are 12, the noes are 10.
The motion has passed. Ms. Blanchard will be referred to the floor with the due pass. We now have Kimberly Guilfoyle of Florida to be ambassador to Greece. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there a debate? Yes, Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I intend to support Ms. Guilfoyle's nomination. I think she's worked hard to develop an understanding of the U.S.-Greek relationship. That's important that we have an ambassador in Athens as soon as possible. We have a very large Hellenic community in New Hampshire who are watching very carefully to make sure that we can have somebody on the ground there who can help Americans in Greece. And while I remain concerned about some of the incidents in Ms. Guilfoyle's past, I hope she will represent all Americans and earn their trust as ambassador to Greece. So I intend to support her.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Is there further debate? There be no further debate. Clerk will call a roll.
Mr. Ricketts?
Aye.
Mr. McCormick?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines?
Aye.
Mr. Haggerty?
Aye.
Mr. Barrasso? Mr. Lee? Mr. Paul? Mr. Cruz?
Aye by
Aye
proxy.
by proxy.
Mr. Scott?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Curtis? Mr. Cornyn? Mrs. Shaheen?
Aye.
Mr. Coons?
No.
Mr. Murphy?
No.
Mr. Kane?
No.
Mr. Merkley?
No.
Mr. Booker?
No by proxy.
Mr. Schatz?
No by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen?
No by proxy.
Ms. Duckworth?
No by proxy.
Ms. Rosen? Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the yeas are 13, the noes are 9.
Motion is passed. Ms. Guilfoyle will be referred to the floor with due pass recommendation. We now have Ms. Jennifer Losetta of Florida to be the alternative representative of the United States of America for special political affairs in the United Nations with the rank of ambassador, etc. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we send the nomination forward to due pass recommendation. Is there debate? There being no debate, clerk will call a roll.
Mr. Ricketts?
Aye.
Mr. McCormick?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines?
Aye.
Mr. Hagerty?
Aye.
Mr. Barrasso?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Paul? Aye. Mr. Cruz?
Aye by proxy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Scott?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Curtis? Mr. Cornyn? Mrs. Shaheen?
Aye.
Mr. Coons?
No.
Mr. Murphy?
No.
Mr. Kane?
No.
Mr. Merkley? Mr. Booker?
No by proxy.
Mr. Schatz?
No by proxy.
Mr. Van Hollen?
No by proxy.
Ms. Duckworth?
No by proxy.
Ms. Rosen?
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the yeas are 13, the noes are 9.
Motion's passed. Ms. Losetta will be referred to the floor with the due pass recommendation. And with that, it concludes the business agenda of our meeting today. And we will now move, when and if we get a representative from the State Department, to have a hearing on State Department reorganization. I'm told that he's on the way, so visit amongst yourselves.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Kane.
can I ask that those of us who are here be counted here at the gavel? There's another hearing going on just down the hall that I'll duck into as long as our witness hasn't shown up.
We've already had the gavel. You are considered present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for coming for the business meeting. Yeah. Great. Even though we weren't at ease, we're now at order anyway, so we'll be as orderly as we can. And with that, good morning, everyone. We're going to hear from Mr. Regas this morning as we talk about the reorganization of the State Department. Before we start, I'd like to welcome everyone in our audience, and as usual, we have a zero tolerance on interruptions, demonstrations, attempt to contact members of the committee or a witness, and anyone who does so will be subject to the rules of the committee, which require arrest, removal, and ban from the committee for a year. So with that, again, we welcome you. It's a public hearing, but we do have the government's business to do. And so the way this will work is I'm going to make a brief opening statement. I'll then yield to Senator Shaheen, who will do likewise. And then Mr. Regas will be glad to hear what you have to say, and then we'll do a round of questions. So with that, thank you for being here today. I know it's not easy, but change is necessary, and moving the needle within the State Department bureaucracy is no small feat, I'm sure. President Trump, Secretary Rubio, and you have listened to the American people's desire for government accountability and have seized on this moment to make once-in-a-generation alterations to a State Department that was stuck in the 20th century. It's no accident that the last major reorganization took place under a previous Republican administration, led by President Bush, with Secretary Colin Powell leading the State Department reform effort. At the time, Secretary Powell was fighting to get computers on desks and employees to use their email. The challenges this administration faces are arguably bigger. After decades of State Department bloat and waste, your team is pushing the department to be leaner and more agile. Where America used to be the world's ATM, this administration is focused on how to responsibly use taxpayer dollars and rein in national debt, all the while outcompeting our adversaries like China, Russia, and Iran. The State Department reorganization plan that Secretary Rubio has shared with Congress is a good start and is sorely needed. I hope it is just this administration's first step towards building a more effective U.S. foreign policy that is responsive to the needs of the American people. With that said, I hope that any reductions in force strongly focus on performance while ensuring that the department's best and brightest personnel who rival any diplomatic service in the world don't just stay at the State Department but thrive there. There are a few areas I remain concerned about. The Office of the Sanction Coordinator and role of science, tech, and cyber at the State Department are not focused properly and need to be reworked. Mr. Regas, as you know, rather than making hires or promotions based on merit and effectiveness, the department under the previous administration created new diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility requirements that distracted from their core mission and undermined morale, created an unfair process for promotions and performance evaluations. Adherence to these goals was assured through a rigid enforcement structure and included, quote, senior advisors for DEIA, end quote, in nearly every bureau and Soviet-style, quote, anonymous reporting portals, end quote, where employees were encouraged to denounce colleagues who would not toe the company line. I'm hoping to see an overhaul of state's performance evaluation and assignment systems in order to fully return the State Department to merit-based principles rather than promotion based on who you know and what you look like. It is hard to represent America when the department's procedures are the antithesis of the American dream, and I know this administration is hard at work on reforming this process. Lastly, I have said many times from this dais, I hope that this reorganization incentivizes the department to rebalance its risk tolerance and get our diplomats into the field where they belong. We aren't going to be our competitors sitting behind desks, whether it's in Washington, Warsaw, or Wellington. We need our diplomats out of the embassies and in the field pushing for America's interests across the world. In 2022, my Secure Embassy Construction Act became law, helping free our personnel to get out and do their jobs. Under the previous administration, the State Department did not fully implement that law. I hope under your leadership this will be remedied, and I expect so. The American people deserve a State Department staffed by our nation's best, all working to advance American interests and outcompete our adversaries. Mr. Regas, you and your colleagues have a tremendous opportunity to return the department to peak performance and create a unified workforce that rewards merit and accomplishment rather than DEI and divisive ideology. I look forward to hearing about your plans for the State Department over your tenure, and thank you again for being with us today. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Deputy Secretary Regas. Thank you for testifying before the committee today. Last Friday, the United States cut more than 1,000 highly specialized diplomatic staff. That action is a gift to our adversaries in China and Russia. China already operates one of the world's largest diplomatic networks with 278 missions rivaling the United States. And you know, these aren't just in countries in the Indo-Pacific and Africa. When we were in France earlier this summer for the Paris Air Show, what we were told is that China had an expanding presence at the air show, more than they had ever seen, and that they had opened 3 new consulates in France and had over 20 Confucius centers. So we should assume that this is happening not just in parts of the world where our allies and partners aren't operating, but it's happening all over. The reductions put America at a disadvantage on everything from negotiating trade deals and securing critical minerals to countering Chinese Communist Party propaganda and protecting U.S. national security. And while we're scaling back and retreating, Beijing is increasing its diplomatic budget this year. And sadly, it's not just China. Russia's drafting plans modeled on the United States Agency for International Development, to expand Moscow's global influence. So with the stakes so high, eliminating key diplomatic bureaus like the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor sends the wrong message to our allies in the global south, in the Indo-Pacific, and on NATO's eastern flank. It undermines long-term trust in the United States as a reliable ally. In fact, we know that China is already saying to many of the countries where we have had programs that they can't trust the United States. We're not a reliable ally. You wrote, or the department wrote, that this restructuring would allow the department to, quote, shape a diplomatic vision that delivers for our nation long into the future. But cutting staff by 15%, slashing the diplomatic budget by more than 80%, undermines that vision, and it could set us back a generation. I support reform and modernization. I think most of the members of this committee do. And if this administration and Secretary Rubio had come to Congress on reform, it would have found a partner. But the department has moved forward despite congressional holds. It's ignored the laws that have been set out by this body. And as a result, the process has been chaotic and haphazard. Let me just give you a few examples which you may or may not have heard about. Those staff people who were supporting Secretary Rubio's trip to Asia were cut while the Secretary was en route home from Malaysia. Foreign Service officers in training for their next mission-critical posts abroad were fired with no warning after we had paid to train them. Civil service employees working on top administration priorities were fired based on old assignments, not based on what they were doing currently. Others received termination notices by mistake. The confusion has left vital positions vacant. We need public affairs officers in Ukraine to combat Russian disinformation. We need political affairs officers in Georgia, where we are seeing month after month of widespread repression. We need consular affairs officers in Colombia to process visas and reduce passports and address the fentanyl traffic that's coming into the United States. We need chemical weapons experts in Syria to prevent terrorists from getting those materials. And yet, these are among the people who were fired on Friday. Earlier this month, I, along with my Democratic colleagues on this committee, introduced the Protecting America's Diplomatic Workforce Act. This is legislation to ensure that before there are large-scale staff terminations, the Department justifies them and assesses the impact on national security, because leaving these roles vacant is not streamlining a bloated bureaucracy, as some have claimed. It weakens our alliances, it increases the risk of conflict, it puts Americans in danger. Deputy Secretary Regas, while many of these changes were initiated under DOGE, the responsibility for implementation now rests with you, and this committee expects answers to the questions that we have this morning. Given that these decisions were not based on performance or evaluations or merit, I hope you'll be able to explain how determinations were made about which staff and bureaus to eliminate, and how these efforts make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous, because so far we haven't seen any evidence of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. With that, Mr. Regas, the floor is yours for a approximate 5-minute opening statement, and then if you have other remarks, obviously we'll be happy to put them into the record, and then we'll open it up to questions. So the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Risch, Ranking Member Shaheen, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to speak about the President's fiscal year 2026 budget request for the Department of State, totaling $28.5 billion. The figure is a decrease of $25.9 billion, or 48% below the FY25 appropriations. As the Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources, it is my responsibility to ensure we are good stewards of the taxpayer dollars you entrust us and provide to the Department, and that they are spent in accordance with the goals of the President and the Secretary. Our budget request reflects Secretary Rubio's department-wide reorganization and the important work we are doing to make the State Department a more efficient and effective organization, better able to advance the core interests of the American people and accountable to the American taxpayers. As Secretary Rubio has stated, we must reform and streamline the State Department so that it becomes an effective instrument of American foreign policy. When the Secretary announced the Department's reorganization plan on April 22nd, the Department had over 1,500 office units in the United States alone. This for an organization that implements foreign policy. Any foreign policy decision, statement, or action by state must pass through more than a dozen or more separate offices for review and clearance before it even reaches a senior State Department official to approve a course of action. This time-consuming and bureaucratic process is no way to run a department in the modern age. We must move at the speed of relevance. The reorganization will merge, eliminate, consolidate, or streamline nearly 45% of the Department's domestic offices. Moving forward, every bureau and office will have a clear mission and purpose. We want to empower our ambassadors and diplomats in the field and our regional bureaus in Washington to push forward the President's America First foreign policy agenda and deliver results for the American people. For too long, single-issue offices have mushroomed in number and influence, often distorting our foreign policy objectives to serve their specific interests, slowing down our ability to function. This reorganization includes a new approach to foreign assistance. As of July 1st, USAID no longer implements foreign assistance. Secretary Rubio has ushered in a new era where the State Department takes the lead and utilizes foreign assistance as a core tool of strategic investment and engagement of the United States. The State Department will now directly administer foreign assistance, and other functions and programs that align with administration priorities are also being transitioned to state. The integration will better align our foreign aid with our foreign policy objectives and will ensure that every taxpayer dollar spent is justified by its benefit to American national interests. Too often we funneled billions of dollars into assistance projects that host governments did not even want and that led to no tangible benefits to the American people. Too often, we have tried to impose divisive ideologies on other countries which push away potential allies and partners into the hands of China, Russia, and others. Too often, we have failed to leverage our generosity and good relations to bring home real achievements for the American people, the same American people who have bankrolled programs for decades which have not provided tangible benefits to their own communities. As the Secretary noted, the countries that benefit most from our generosity often fail to reciprocate that support. For example, sub-Saharan African nations voted with the United States only 29% of the time on essential UN resolutions in 2023, despite receiving billions in assistance paid for by the American people. Going forward, the United States will remain the largest foreign aid donor in the world by a wide margin. China and Russia do not deliver the kind of life-saving assistance that the American people have provided through USAID and state for decades, and there is no sign this will change. But our focus will be on trade, not aid, and we will always advance the interests of the United States. While the United States will put America first in all aspects of our foreign policy, we will continue to build and cultivate positive, constructive relationships with the governments and peoples of the world. Congress and American taxpayers expect us to deliver results for the American people, and I look forward to working with Secretary Rubio and this committee to deliver those results. As I've said before, I know that every dollar we spend and every program we fund comes from the labor of a tax-paying American family. Our goal is to have a State Department that is accountable to the American people and effective in unleashing the potential of the world's most talented diplomatic workforce. Thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Regas. And I thank you for pointing out the fact that we beat ourselves up a lot over this, that, or the other thing, but there's no more generous country on the planet than the United States of America or the United States American taxpayers. We have done tremendous amounts, and we really do not get the appreciation for it. You're pointing out of how the votes at the UN go are ones that those votes are to be taken note of. I'm always impressed, however, when I'm dealing with other countries and they're looking for something like building a nuclear plant or something like that, that they really want to deal with Americans. That's what they want to do. Why is that? Because we are who we are. And that, I think it's really important to stress that, who the American people are, what our values are. And one of the things that distinguishes us from other countries on the planet is the fact that we have a rule of law. And you deal with China, you have no rule of law. You're at the beck and call and at the mercy of the Chinese Communist Party. And people know that, businessmen know that, and that's why they want to deal with America. Look, when you're doing management like this, changes, as I said, are always difficult. I get that. And the other thing that I would point out, and that I think you didn't talk about, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about, this is not a one and done. This is a everyday, all-day reassessment of where you are, what you're doing. And this obviously is a big step to start with. Glad to see it. I'm assuming there's going to be a phase 2 at some point in time. Talk about the ongoing efforts after this initial step is over.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. We will, like any large organization, we need to continue to review and evaluate how we operate and how we are effectively delivering on the President's policy priorities all over the world. This reorganization was informed by the senior leadership and the career foreign service and senior civil servant officials who are at the department. We asked them what works, what doesn't work, how would you like to operate, what are the pain points that you've experienced getting things done. And these are people who've served in Republican and Democrat administrations and gave us some really good feedback about where they would like to see reforms implemented at the Department of State. We told them this reorganization, we wanted to focus on our domestic footprint, make sure we were doing what we needed to reorient the department and focus it on the critical foreign policy function it's designed to deliver on. And we're going to continue to do that. It's going to be an iterative process. The entire time we're here is looking at how things work, how they don't work, and we're always going to be finding, I think, inefficiencies in how things happen. That's just natural in any large department or organization in the government or in the private sector. I've served in both, and government isn't home to inefficiency. You have plenty of that going on in the private sector as well, but it is incumbent upon leaders of any organization to look at how they're delivering and come up with opportunities to improve.
Well said. Thank you. I'm always impressed when I go out of the country, and for that matter here, about how State Department employees are probably the least partisan of any government agency that there is, and I'm always impressed with the way they conduct themselves, the way they treat us when we're out in the field, and I have to say that I'm glad to hear what you said, and that is that these people were consulted about going forward, what works and what doesn't work, because I have found them never to be bashful when you ask them what can we do better. So I'm glad to hear that. I assume you're familiar with my Secure Embassy Construction and Counterterrorism Act. But tell me, I haven't been fully satisfied with the way that it's been implemented, and the Embassy in a Box legislation, both of those. Tell me your thoughts on those, please.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. We just onboarded a new head of the Office of Overseas Building Operations, someone who has extensive experience in this area. And I've discussed with him this act and also just our desire to engage in what we've called expeditionary diplomacy, making sure that our ambassadors are engaging with the foreign governments that they are sent to post to engage with, engaging with the local business communities and population, and doing everything they can to advance America's national and foreign policy and security and economic interests. It's hard to do that if you are hunkered down in a bunker that is masquerading as an embassy. Certainly there are parts of the world that are very dangerous, that are high threat environments, and you need to have a really secure kind of environment. But to the extent that we can find safe ways to make sure our ambassadors and our diplomats are getting out and engaging, looking at what our friends and allies in those countries are doing and how they're going about their business, I think is a good way to inform what we're doing. And also just the cost that goes into some of these construction projects are just really too high. The requirements that we have, there's a lot of security requirements, as you know, but figuring out how to make those sort of replicatable, so we're not reinventing the wheel in every country where we go to build an embassy or a consular post, to ensure that we can have more companies bid on these. Someone told me there's only 2 general contractors that are able to fulfill our needs and build embassies overseas, and that is not a recipe for competition or driving costs down when you have a duopoly. So we want to find ways to increase competition while building safe, secure embassies for our diplomats overseas.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And your point is well taken, that every single construction project is different in that the security of every country is different. There's some that, like you say, you've got to build a very secure environment, and others not so much. So we appreciate your attention to that. For that, Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Regas, I agree that people want to deal with the United States because of our values, and that we've been a very generous country, and that's made a difference for so many people around the world. That's why I find it so distressing when there are reports that we're destroying 500 metric tons of food that could feed 1.5 million children a week, and we're destroying it because for no other reason than the administration put a hold on getting that foreign assistance out to people, and so now it's spoiled. I don't think that's consistent with the values of the United States, or consistent with American taxpayers and how they want to see their money spent. So I asked for a list of offices and bureaus affected by the personnel cuts that took place on Friday. I've not received anything yet, but my team has been able to uncover some of the cuts that are concerning. So I want to ask you what you know about some of those cuts. Are you aware that on Friday you fired the entire Office of Casualty Assistance? And just to be clear for people who are watching, this is an office that was set up after the Nairobi and Dar es Salaam al-Qaeda bombings in 1998 to assist family members of U.S. personnel and citizens who die overseas. The entire team was fired on Friday in the midst of trying to bring back an American citizen who had died overseas. I don't think the family thinks that that's a good firing. Were you aware of that?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I was aware that function is being folded into another office. So
how are we handling the body of the person who died overseas who no longer has somebody to help them? Could you please find an answer to that? I'm not going to ask you to answer that right now because I'm sure you don't know the answer. And we need to get accurate information. But are you aware that you fired members of the Fraud Prevention Office and your Consular Affairs Bureau, and you assured us that Consular Affairs would not be affected by these cuts?
So the individuals in consular affairs who are processing passports and adjudicating passports, that function was not touched. Other functions which have sort of a management remit and can be combined into other offices, we did find efficiencies and economies of scale to combine management functions across the department that were doing, auditing, human resources functions, billing that were resident in numerous bureaus were either consolidated up into the EX offices of each of the undersecretariats, and to a large extent, a number of them were moved and consolidated into the management bureau itself.
I would appreciate if you would provide the committee the information about how that reorganization is happening, since we have asked you for that information in the past. You mentioned the Bureau of Overseas Building Operations, and the chairman was asking about that. About 50% of that office was terminated. 5 civil servants out of 13 who handled not only architecture but who also serve as building code officials were terminated, as well as the 10 civil servants were ripped out of 14 in the office that manages space planning requirements. Do you know how many personnel were terminated in the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement? This is the bureau that's responsible for preventing drugs and criminals from reaching America?
Yes, so that bureau was combined with another bureau, so the essential function of the International Narcotics Bureau remains. It was just combined with another
So how
bureau.
many were fired?
I believe the entire office is my understanding.
So who's got the expertise that's lost from that office if they've all been fired?
So there was, I can give you the name of the combined office, but there were numerous offices at the department that had overlapping responsibilities and redundant capabilities.
And why is the department letting diplomats go who we've invested years in training in language skills? Some of those who have been let go are fluent in 5 or 6 languages. Was there an assessment of the expertise it was losing in these layoffs? And how was that assessment done? Is it a written evaluation? Is it an assessment of what the needs are in the future for the department?
Yes, so what we did is in the instance where offices were combined, you have what's called a competitive area, and each office is its own competitive area. So we did, this was the most complicated reduction in force ever conducted by the federal government, and we did it in consultation with the Office of Personnel Management. We actually hired them, the professionals there, to help us run this program. It's called a bump and retreat, and what you do is you take all of the, after asking your senior leadership, what are the functions that you need to carry out this mission, and what positions and what skill sets do you need, and what level of experience do you need to be able to execute on this mission? And you say you've got maybe, we only need 25 people in this office, but we're combining an office that has, total 75 people among the 3 offices. What OPM does is then take everyone's skills, experience, expertise, veterans preference, tenure, and they compete them against each other for each position that is in the combined area. So while there are people who who have skills and experience who were unfortunately part of the reduction in force, you can sort of take some comfort to know no one ever wants to be the one that's receiving the reduction in force, but that the people who remain were the ones who ranked highest under this sort of merit systems process that ensured the highest skilled, the most tenured, the people with the highest number of years of experience and veterans preference were the people who remained.
And do you have anything written that shows how this process was done?
Yeah, certainly.
Can you provide the committee with that information?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. That was a very good, clear explanation. People read this in the paper, X number of people were fired, and they say, oh, that's terrible, as if somebody went in there and just said, you, and you were fired. Your explanation of how this was scientifically approached and looking to keep the best people in the three agencies as you combine them into one is absolutely a superb way of doing it. Thank you for that clear explanation.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Secretary, for being here today. Perhaps you've heard the phrase that if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. One of the ways that you could assess that is by looking at an org chart. And so, in fact, Secretary Rubio said that if I show you an org chart of what the State Department used to look like and what it looks like today, it's unrecognizable. So I decided to look at the org chart. So we got the org chart here from 2000. And you can obviously I'm not expecting you to be able to read it. It'd be kind of an eye chart, but it's really just kind of a visual representation of what the different offices, agencies, and so forth were looking like. And then let's show the one from the org chart for after the Biden administration. And Tyler, just hold both up there. Right? So if you look at it, I mean, just visually, you can see that it's just a lot more complicated after the Biden administration. In fact, I count there's 16 additional bureaus and offices that were added over the last 2 decades. And, to me, this is an indication that there could be bureaucratic bloat in your organization, similar to what maybe you just described here. And not that organizations shouldn't change. Organizations should change and they should adapt to the new circumstances. In fact, I think, Deputy Secretary, your position wasn't even around a few years ago. But more does not necessarily translate to better. So, Deputy Secretary Rodriguez, can you explain how the differences in the 2 different org charts, here, Tyler, keep the other one up, please, thank you. Can you explain how the 2 different, the illustration of these 2 different org charts kind of demonstrates the challenge the State Department has long faced in terms of efficiency and agility, and how your proposed reorganization is going to address this?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that question. As I noted, we asked the people sort of at the top of each of those, there are 6 undersecretaries, about their bureaus that report down to them, and ask them what works, what doesn't work, where can we consolidate functions. And as anyone, you've been a governor, you've run a large organization. These things just kind of come up over time. You have some issue of the day that needs to be addressed, and it's a real problem. And you create an office to address it, right? And they probably did a good job and addressed it, and then 5 years later, maybe the problem isn't as salient or as urgent, but the Bureau remains. And what we've looked at here is to the extent that some of those issues still need some day-to-day management, maybe they don't need to have their own Bureau. Maybe they can be combined with another Bureau that does similar or overlapping functions. And we found that in a number of different places. We had 3 offices that dealt with sanctions, and we said, okay, well, sanctions are important, but do we need 3 offices? Can it be done in 1 office? The same thing with nuclear proliferation. The State Department had absorbed an agency years ago, but that had remained its own bureau. And so we asked folks, how can we continue to execute on these important missions, but do it in the most efficient and effective way possible so that you got clearer lines of accountability and a better use of resources?
Great. Well, thank you very much. You mentioned I was governor of Nebraska. And one of the things we focused on as well was government efficiency. In fact, we actually combined different agencies together, similar to what you're doing with your different offices here. One of the other things we did is we trained 30,000 people of our state teammates in Lean Six Sigma, which is a process improvement methodology we've discussed. It's used in the private sector to eliminate waste, redundant steps, reduce costs, and improve service. Because of that investment, we were able to save our state teammates 900,000 hours of their time by finding simpler steps, so we reduced the amount of time it took them to do things, and save taxpayers $115 million. The private sector has competition to drive that. Government obviously does not. That's why it's so important that we have leaders who take the steps to try and drive these things. Deputy Secretary, when we spoke before your nomination hearing, I appreciate that you're focused on personnel management, and I agree with, I think, what you said is personnel is policy, and process is also performance. Now, the State Department's organization chart better reflects the administration's priorities. What are some specific plans to go beyond just the structure to focus on day-to-day process and system to impact service, to improve it, and get rid of waste and inefficiency?
Oh, thank you for that question, Senator. I think that is a kind of a daily exercise when you're in the business of management, is asking how things work, how can we make them work better. We're going to take a hot minute here to let the new organization sort of settle in, and over the next 3 weeks or so, bureaus that are being combined are going to come together under new leadership, and it's going to. I think it's a daily iterative process. Say, what are we doing? How can we do it better? Why does something? And you see it come up every day when you've got questions about why did this take too long, or why do we get this constituent complaint about what's happening here? It's usually a sign that something is not working as well as it should, and that's an opportunity to drill down and say, how did this happen? How can we prevent it? Were there too many steps involved, or maybe is there a step that's missing that should be there? And I think it's just a constant evaluation about what is the ultimate goal we're trying to do in each of these areas, whether it's an OBO building, safe, secure buildings at a price to the taxpayer that we can justify, or whether it's delivering on passports to Americans. We're doing that in under 2 weeks now. The standard is like 4 to 6 weeks, so I think we're doing a good job there. But there's always issues that come up that people come up with, with constituents who have visa issues, or how are we dealing with our trading partners? That's a big thing that the president has really led the way on, and where the State Department is going to be right behind him, making sure that we're able to deliver for American businesses and American workers, and also onshore some of these critical national security functions and supply chains as well.
Right. Well, I thank you very much, Deputy Secretary. I want to point out that I asked one of your predecessors what her goal was to process a passport application. She couldn't tell me. She didn't have a goal. So the fact that you actually have standards is a good start in being able to actually deliver for the American people. I'd recommend that the things you're talking about, you formalize that process through Lean Six Sigma or another process of improvement methodology, so that you actually formalize and you train people on how to do it. So it's not just one-offs the way it could devolve to, like, hey, we have a problem, but that you actually make it a formal process as part of the culture that people are doing this each and every day. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me go over.
Thank you, Senator Ricketts. Mr. Ricketts, you're looking at 3 governors here, former governors here, all of whom came from the private sector.
Yeah.
And Senator Ricketts' comment about the fact that the private sector has a way of dealing with this. Competition between companies makes efficiency absolutely necessary. You're not in business very long. All of us, when we took office, I'm speaking for myself, but I suspect my colleagues here had the same reaction, and that is found just what you said, and that is there isn't that competition for efficiency in the government. So it takes a strong hand at the tiller to do this. And the good news is in America we change administrations at the state level, at the federal level, and these things, as you're doing right now, I have to say though, I doubt any one of the 3 of us had any kind of the magnitude of reorganization that you guys are dealing with. So thank you for your explanations. With that,
thank you,
Senator. Who was here first? I don't have a list. Were you here first? Well, then why don't you take the floor, Senator Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member, thank you, Mr. Deputy Secretary. I'm just going to lay out 6 principles and see if we agree, because I think we agree that these are core goals of U.S. foreign policy and the State Department. That we need a nimble and efficient and effective State Department to strengthen our place in the world, that we have to win a global tech competition with China on AI, 5G, quantum, that we have to counter PRC aggression in the South China Sea and beyond, that we have to bring home American citizens who are wrongfully detained, that we have to do everything in our power to stop Iran from building a nuclear weapon, and that we need to repel Russian aggression and bring about a just and lasting end to the war in Ukraine. Any disagreement with those as goals?
Not at all, sir.
Well, like the 3 other senators, I worked in the private sector in manufacturing. I was a county executive. I led reorganizations. And I will tell you, I am much less concerned about the org chart. A cleaner, more concise org chart makes general sense. I have signed up to work with Senator Haggerty on a bipartisan State Department reform and reorganization, which may end up being less relevant after some of these actions. But the thing I focus on the most is talent and skills, less than title and function. And my concern about the RIF that you've led, that has pushed 1,300 people out the door, is that the way it was done has cost us huge talent. For example, these RIFs, as I have understood it from folks inside the department, were not, in fact, wide open competitions based on skill and talent. You rewrote the Foreign Service Manual, came up with hundreds of competition boxes, and put a very small number of people competing against each other, really fixed based on where they were serving on May 29th, and in many cases forcing them to compete against one other person. As you heard from the ranking member, some of the concerns I've got about the skills and talent that just went out the door are the top of the list for me. Your top experts on AI, quantum, 5G, and cyber. The folks from the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy who were working on preventing proliferation to China walked out the door. Staff from the Bureau of East Asian Pacific Affairs who craft our efforts to push back on PRC aggression in the South China Sea walked out the door. The staff who work with our ASEAN partners walked out the door right after Secretary Rubio had attended a summit of ASEAN. And we both agree that we care about ending the risk of Iran getting a nuclear weapon, yet you literally just fired department experts on nuclear proliferation, including experts with decades of expertise on Iran's nuclear weapons program. Ending Russia's invasion of Ukraine, yet the intelligence analysts with decades of experience on Russia and Ukraine walked out the door. Claiming that you've consolidated offices in the interests of efficiency, I think misses the point that this competition was done in a sloppy, rushed way that has cost us decades of relevant critical experience. So to this point, and I urged the other deputy secretary and the secretary to consider this point, you should facilitate a more robust competitive process for allowing reassignment of the RIFT employees who are on administrative leave at the moment. I think you have lost key and essential skills and talents from within the ranks of our Foreign Service. And the chairman and the ranking member recognized in their previous comments, these are dedicated, loyal, career professionals who bring to their service overseas every day rivers of talent. I recognize you're trying to clean up the wire chart and close down some of the single issue offices. I'm not quibbling over that. What I am disagreeing with vigorously is the way this rushed process led to folks with decades of relevant senior experience in technical areas and intelligence areas and operational areas that are not easily repeated. Will you consider allowing for a broader re-competition amongst and between those who've been RIFed and the thousands of jobs that remain open or unfilled?
So thank you for that question, Senator. So the RIF process, as established under law and regulation, does allow for, so the bump and retreat that I described, where you compete people against, skills, experience, tenure, language, whatever. That same process works in reverse when there are openings that people can apply for. So as there are openings available for people to be considered for, they can certainly, no one is prevented from necessarily coming back into the department if there's a position that is open and being competitively hired for.
So while folks are on administrative leave following Friday's RIF of about 1,300 people, they can compete to return to service for open positions?
Yes. The caveat being there is a government-wide hiring freeze right now.
Okay, so no. The answer is no.
For the time being.
Let me just close with two other observations. China is expanding their diplomatic footprint and engagement around the world. Our global competition with China is something I've heard every member of this committee talk about, including our secretary, when he served on this committee. You are proposing a budget cut of 50% to the U.S. State Department. I don't think that's wise. I don't think we can afford it. I don't support it. I frankly think finding efficiencies, always a good thing. Finding efficiencies that cost skill, talent, and ability, not a good thing. Slashing this department in half in the middle of a critical competition globally. At the same time we walk away from aid, a horrible idea. Last, trade not aid. I've repeated that line here when I helped build the Development Finance Corporation in a bipartisan way, a bill that President Trump signed into law in his first term. Trade is often preferable to aid, but trade, when our president is chaotically leading a hard-to-decipher tariff fight with not just our adversaries but our allies, means that trade, as a promise of how we're going to extend our engagement and influence in the world, is likely to fail. We should not cut this department in half. We should not walk out the door its most talented people, and we should not replace foreign aid with the unlikely to succeed promise of trade when we don't seem to have a clear and consistent strategy for how to use that trade. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here today. How many people work for the State Department?
We have over, I can give you that exact number here now. I believe it's over 70,000 work for the State Department between foreign service, civil service, and locally employed
Again,
staff.
I didn't pick that up. What was it? How many people?
It is over, I can give you the exact number here. It is over 70,000.
70,000?
Yeah.
Yes.
76,000.
Yes. Thank you.
76,000, I think I heard. So I know there's some people here in Washington who think bigger government is always better.
Yes.
And people talk a good talk when it comes to efficiency, but don't you dare try to cut any of a bloated bureaucracy in order to achieve that efficiency. It's a no-win proposition, it seems to me, in the minds of in a common mindset here in Washington, D.C. How many people are you talking about riffing?
It was about 1,300.
1,300 out of 76,000?
Yes.
Okay, I never was good at math, but that's a pretty small percentage of the overall number of employees at the State Department. So do you think, in your opinion and Secretary Rubio's opinion, can you all do the job with the current budget request, which is, as you pointed out, 48% below last year's fiscal year request?
Yes, we do.
And how in the world can you do that?
Well, I think we are looking at some of the key functions that the department does and ensuring that our diplomatic functions are continuing. A lot of that reduction was in the foreign assistance budget, so we've requested the America First Opportunity Fund, which is will be a pool from which the Secretary can direct foreign assistance be given either to directly bilaterally to countries or to multilateral institutions, depending on where he assesses we are going to get the best return on investment and have the highest likelihood for advancing the President's foreign policy priorities.
So for those of us concerned about America's representation around the world through our diplomacy, do our ambassadors play a key role in that?
Certainly, and the reorganization is designed to empower our ambassadors and our regional bureaus, the people who are at the tip of the spear when it comes to engaging diplomatically with the rest of the world. That's where we want the power and decision-making to rest in the department rather than sort of in these bureaus back in Washington, D.C.
And I know the chairman has done a good job. The committee's done a good job moving ambassadors through the committee, but by my count, there are currently 29 Senate-confirmed positions for ambassadors around the country that are awaiting confirmation on the Senate floor. Would it be helpful to our diplomatic efforts for the Senate to get off the dime and actually confirm those nominees?
It certainly would, and I think it sent a positive message to the rest of the world that the United States of America is sending an ambassador to their country, that it was picked by the President himself, and that this person represents the President, and they can have confidence when they're dealing with this person that they speak for the President of the United States.
So blocking or slow walking the confirmation of ambassador nominees is not achieving the goal of enhancing our diplomatic presence around the world. Is that right?
It's not helpful.
How many people who work for the State Department are political appointees as opposed to career individuals? Do you know what that breakdown is?
We have somewhere around 100 right now, political appointees at the department.
So only 100 out of the 76,000 are Trump appointees?
That's correct.
And so these are people, the rest of them are largely career folks who've been there forever, or yes, at least they're for a long time. Right?
Yes, yeah.
And is it hard for an administration when they come into office, having campaigned on a particular platform or agenda, to come in and actually execute that platform or agenda when all you have is 100 people there who are pursuing that same goal, but perhaps thousands of career people at the State Department who are doing their best to undermine that what you're trying to accomplish?
It certainly makes it harder to do our job and to advance the president's policy priorities without the team that we need in place.
And that's why you think you can do more with less in terms of your budget, in terms of the number of employees there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Keene.
I yield to Senator Rosen as long as I can come next on the Democratic side.
I see. Okay. Well, I'm glad you have that figured out. Senator Rosen, you're up.
Thank you, Senator Kaine. We have dueling committees going on, trying to get questions and everything. I appreciate it. And thank you, Chairman Risch, Ranking Member Shaheen, for holding this hearing. Thank you to Mr. Regas for joining us today. And as I stated yesterday, the State Department's recent reductions in force should be upsetting to anyone who cares about the United States' national security. From the Department's misguided reorganization to the plans to riff our closure of USAID, this administration's approach to our foreign policy and national security is deeply troubling. It's providing, actually, opportunities left and right for our adversaries like the PRC to help fill the gaps where we're pulling people out. And we'll talk about that. I'm going to turn to my first question, particularly about counterterrorism. So the state's Bureau of Counterterrorism, it bolsters our national security by playing a leading role in developing coordinated strategies and approaches to defeat terrorism abroad. Terrorism abroad, it doesn't stay abroad, let's just put it that way. I have significant concerns that many of the recent decisions by the administration regarding CT work could actually lead to an increase in terrorist threats across the globe. So, Deputy Secretary, it appears that as part of the department's reorganization, the CT Bureau has terminated dozens of programs that support countries to counter those CT threats that, again, we pretty sure they don't always stay in those countries. And with the closure of USAID, and the Office of Countering Violent Extremism, it really remains unclear what, if any, programs will exist that prevent the recruitment of desperate people to terrorism. Desperate people get recruited to terrorism every day around this globe. So do you believe these changes could lead to an increase in CT threats in the United States?
Thank you for the Senator question. So the Bureau of Counterterrorism was merged with the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement.
I'm asking what you believe. Do you believe that these changes will lead to an increase or not?
So the essential functions will remain. As I discussed earlier, the key functions that we want to continue carrying forward will still be executed at the Department of State. They're just not going to be done
what
sort of siloed
about the staff that counter white nationalism and anti-Semitism? They've been riffed. We know that this is a problem around the world, particularly since October 7th. Can you confirm whether the department will continue to counter white nationalism and anti-Semitism overseas?
So, as I described earlier, how the bump and retreat process works is the people who have the greatest level of experience, the longest tenure, the best language skills are the people who are competed against in a combined organization. So the people, even though people who did have skills and experience did unfortunately get riffed.
So how many staff do you expect to work on CT issues across this your regional bureaus and what you're doing?
Yeah, I can certainly get you that number. I mean, what the combined office is.
And are any of the CT advisors going to the Bureau of European Eurasian Affairs as they're proposed to go to other regional bureaus? Do you know that? Or do you have to get that?
Right. So the idea behind the reorganization was to move a lot of these functions into the regional bureaus and to the individual post level, so the people there who are on the ground engaging in diplomacy.
Would you be willing to commit to provide a report to us that we're still going to continue to counter these issues of terrorism, white nationalism, and anti-Semitism across the new reorganization? It is extremely important to people in the United States and around the globe.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I think the president's talked about,
I'm asking you if you'll commit to come back to this committee and report on the workforce you have working in those.
Certainly, certainly.
Thank you. I want to move on to women and girls because I'm deeply concerned about the department's proposal to eliminate the Office of Global Women's Issues, GWI, and the decision to eliminate. It really seems like all of the staff, all of it, in the office this past Friday. So does the State Department plan to implement a policy that promotes gender equality, empowers women and girls, and advances women's rights? Just yes or no is pretty simple.
Oh, certainly, yeah. And I think, as the Secretary stated, the needs of women in Japan are different than the needs of women in Guatemala or Ghana or Pakistan or Germany.
Yes.
And so having a sort of a more finely tuned approach, I think, is what we're going for here.
Because I believe that if we abandon women and girls around the globe, we, again, promote instability in families and nations around the world, and that, again, relates to desperate people turning to terrorism in order to take care of their families. We know women are often the glue that keeps stability going on. So I hope that you continue to focus on this issue. I would look forward to working with you on that, and look forward. We only have 6 seconds. I would like to know about, for the record, how many staff have been let go and what are some of your proposals going forward. So we'll submit that for the record. Look forward to your answer. Thank you again, Senator Kaine and Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kaine, I guess you made the deal. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Regas, good to see you again. Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce into the record an article from Reuters dated May 16, 2025, titled, "Exclusive U.S. Aid Cuts Leave Food for Millions Moldering in Storage."
It will be entered in the record.
Let me just read some excerpts from this article that came out 2 months ago today. Food rations that could supply 3.5 million people for a month are moldering in warehouses around the world because of U.S. aid cuts and risk becoming unstable. The food stocks have been stuck inside 4 U.S. government warehouses since the Trump administration's decision in January to cut global aid programs. A spokesperson for the State Department, which oversees USAID, said in response to detailed questions about the food stocks that it was working to ensure the uninterrupted continuation of aid programs and their transfer by July as part of the USAID decommissioning process. Quote, USAID is continuously consulting with partners on where to best distribute commodities at USAID warehouses. A proposal to hand the stocks to aid organizations is on hold. Finally, nearly 500 tons of high-energy biscuits stored at a USAID warehouse in Dubai are due to expire in July, according to a former USAID official. The biscuits could feed at least 27,000 acutely malnourished children for a month. The biscuits are now likely to be destroyed or turned into animal feed. That article was from 2 months ago. Yesterday, The Atlantic reported that the expiration date on those 500 tons of nutritious food for starving kids was now upon us, and the U.S. had decided to incinerate that food rather than allow starving children to have it. Mr. Regas, you're the Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources. These are resources that were purchased with U.S. taxpayer dollars. They're specifically designed to save the lives of starving children. Why is it a good use of resources to not distribute that food to kids and instead burn it?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'd have to look into that particular issue and see how those foodstuffs got there.
Can I just interrupt for a second? I asked this question at a hearing yesterday so you would be prepared to know that I would ask it today. And we called your office to tell you that I would ask it today. So the notion that you need to look into it strikes me as a little bit odd. As you sit here today, is that food being distributed to kids or is it being incinerated?
If it's been expired, my understanding is it's the policy of the government to not distribute expired food or medicine.
Then given that this has been written about for months, and the article in March that I introduced in the record was not the first. We've been asking Secretary Rubio about this back into March. Since it has been known for months that this food would have an expiration date, why has the State Department decided to burn it rather than distribute it to starving children?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that question, Senator. I am as distressed about that as you are.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, does that kind of make you feel ashamed? Are you proud of it, or are you indifferent to it?
Look, I don't think it's, I'm not going to say I'm ashamed or proud or indifferent to it, but I think that was a failure.
How about this, just as a statement of proposition? If the U.S. uses taxpayer dollars to buy specialty foods for starving children, I think it's better that the food be distributed to starving children rather than incinerated. You would agree with that? I completely
agree with that. Yeah, I think this was just a casualty of the
I have a hard time. I view it as an intentional thing, because if we suddenly woke up in July, oh gosh, the expiration date is today.
Yeah.
That would be one thing. But in March, there was a request by the World Food Program and others, look, if you're not going to distribute it, maybe you've decided, the U.S., that starving kids are no longer your thing. Yeah. But you have this asset. If you're not going to distribute it, we'll distribute it.
Yeah.
So it's not a mistake if you've been on notice of it for 2 months and you've made the decision to keep the warehouse locked and allow this food to be destroyed, rather than, again, I think the article says this would feed at least 27,000 acutely malnourished children for a month. I mean, so is this incompetence or cruelty or both?
I'd have to look into what the facts of the matter were. If there were another aid organization that was asking to have access to that, to deliver it.
Well, yeah, I want you to look into it. I really hoped you'd come to me today and say, having been put on notice I was going to ask this, we're going to give the food to kids. Yeah. Hey, you went to Boston University. Who is the most famous BU alum?
The most famous BU alum?
Next to you.
I don't know. I don't want to offend anyone that's graduated from BU. But
I'll tell you who it is.
Okay.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
What do you think Martin Luther King Jr. would say about a nation that purchased food for starving kids and then locked it in a warehouse until it expired and incinerated it, rather than giving it out so that 27,000 starving kids could survive meagerly for 1 more month?
Well, we're still the biggest giver of aid anywhere in the world by far. So I think, look,
I'll just conclude. Yeah. I want to hand it back to you, Mr. Chair. A lot of complicated issues. Sometimes the tiniest detail really exposes the soul. We had a big bill that increased the deficit by $3 trillion and big tax breaks and cut SNAP and all of that. But a government that is put on notice, here are resources that will save 27,000 starving kids. Can you please distribute them or give them to someone who can, who decides, no, we would rather keep the warehouse locked, let the food expire, and then burn it. To me, that really exposes the soul of this endeavor. And I am glad to hear you at least say that my questions cause you some concern.
I did say that. I'll say it again. And look, this is a media account, so I'd want to look into, like, I have to, forgive me if I don't always take everything that's reported in the media to be 100% factual, but I do want to find out what happened here and get to the ground truth.
Thank you.
And if that's what happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Merkley.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your testimony today, and certainly reorganizations can eliminate inefficiencies, but they can also raise a lot of questions about values. But one thing I was really struck by is the new guidance that has been put out for evaluating both mid-level and senior personnel in the State Department that basically uses the word fidelity, essentially saying how loyal are you and how quickly do you align yourself, and I'll quote, completely align oneself and one team to the most current USG goals. Back in 1981, I was a State Department fellow in India in between 2 years in graduate school. I was later admitted to the Foreign Service, but I turned it down. I was working as a presidential fellow for Secretary Weinberger in the Department of Defense. But I was really struck at that time. The State Department officers said, look, we develop extraordinary
expertise in the field on complicated issues around the world, we funnel that information to help the decision makers back in D.C. make decisions. What I see emphasized in this list of promotion criteria, there's not a single thing in it that says developing regional expertise, language expertise, knowledge of complex issues, informing and helping shape the dialogue in a responsible way. There's nothing like that. It's all about loyalty, implementing whatever DC says. Are we completely devaluing our foreign service officers for their development of expertise that can help enlighten our own policy agenda?
So thank you for that question, Senator. So the core precepts for promotion at the department were updated. The fidelity precept, which you just quoted, was replaced the DEI precept, but it calls for fidelity to the Constitution of the United States. It calls for fidelity to executing the president's policy priorities, which we're in the executive branch. The president stood before the American people and went from one end of this country to the other, saying what he wanted to do, and that policy agenda was ratified by the voters in November, and it's incumbent upon the career foreign service officers and the career civil service officers at the State Department, and indeed at every other executive branch department, to faithfully carry out what the president stood for before the American people. So the American people have confidence that when they go to the ballot booth and elect a president, that what they voted for will get implemented.
Okay, well, I will say that actually the criteria talk about how much you accentuate executive power under Article 2. And there is a huge debate going on now as we see ourselves slide into an authoritarian state, both the defunding of agencies, the firing of employees, the reorganizing without congressional direction are all factors assaulting the separation of powers, which is actually an assault on the Constitution of the United States. But I'm going to set that aside for the moment because I'm concerned about the values represented in this reorganization. And I'll give you some example. Firing the consular fraud prevention in passport operations. Makes no sense to me that our value is to allow fraud in passports. Second of all, firing the leadership team for the coordinator for Afghan relocation efforts. This is firing the team that's standing up for the people who stood with us in Afghanistan, and now we are abandoning them. Abandoning our partners is not a value that I think our State Department should be promoting. Third, proceeding to terminate the personnel who were taking on the issue of Russian propaganda in Ukraine. I do not think promoting Russian propaganda is a value that our State Department should be promoting. Fourth, firing the experts on money laundering. Are you kidding me? That is now our strategy, is to make sure that money laundering is easier around the world, not to mention that in areas of fast-changing technology, experts in quantum technology and AI were terminated. And let's look at one other case here, firing the team that was working on war crimes committed by Russia and Ukraine. Our value is now that we don't care about war crimes. I don't think that's an American position. And finally, I'll note, firing the entire Bureau of Energy Resources, which carries on international energy policy. Energy is critical to the future of our economy and success in the world. So these are not values that are American values. This reorganization was, as my colleague Chris Coons noted, hastily planned, poorly coordinated, and it's going to do real damage to the security and success of the United States of America. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Van Hollen. Thank you, Senator Daines. Welcome, Mr. Deputy Secretary.
Thank you, Senator.
Secretary Rubio claimed that these big layoffs were, quote, a deliberate step to reorganize the State Department, while a senior official promised to carry them out in a manner that preserves the dignity of federal employees. In practice, the process has been badly botched, wasteful, and deeply disrespectful of the department's workforce. I heard the figures thrown around earlier about 76,000 State Department employees. You know very well, Mr. Deputy Secretary, over 50,000 of them are Foreign Service nationals who help do everything from maintain embassies and consulates to a lot of essential work. So that's a very misleading number. We have 14,000 plus Foreign Service officers, 12,000 civil servants, and of those civil servants, about 1,000 have been fired. These are employees with expertise in critical minerals, artificial intelligence, human rights, and consular affairs were let go, along with those that are fluent in languages like Chinese, Arabic, Russian, and Farsi, many of whom have received their training at taxpayer expense. Staff on parental leave were dismissed, including one person who had given birth just 12 hours earlier. The department used cheap procedural tricks to fire career officers with no regard for veteran status, performance, or tenure, directly contradicting Congress's intent. And at the same time, senior leadership failed to show up to thank these patriotic employees. One Trump-appointed Deputy Assistant Secretary took the day off as her team working on Afghan resettlement picked up pink slips. And while Secretary Rubio met with ASEAN counterparts in Malaysia, the team that had prepared his briefing materials in the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs was being fired. Mr. Secretary, I hope you'll agree that you have a duty to tell the truth to Congress, do you?
Oh, certainly.
Okay. Well, you testified in the House yesterday, and you testified, and I'm quoting, my understanding is we did not make any cuts in the Consular Affairs Bureau, unquote. But you did make cuts in the Consular Affairs Bureau, did you not?
So right after I said that statement, by the second part of that, the sentence immediately after that, I clarified and I said we did not cut anyone who was doing passport adjudications or customer service. The cuts in the Consular Affairs Bureau were to administrative functions, not to any of the customer service.
Well, my understanding, Mr. Secretary, there's going to be a lot of review of all this, is that you fired about 100 staffers, including teams that investigate passport and visa fraud. You also said in your House testimony that with respect to the office that prepared the Secretary for his trip overseas, none of the people who prepped him were terminated. That wasn't true, was it?
So the people what I said was the people in the country bureaus were not let go. They said the people who prepared him. So he was prepared by all the people who were in those country bureaus, and to the extent that the ASEAN Bureau, all these kind of regional offices were absorbed, or the functions were absorbed by the country-specific and regional offices.
With respect, I think that the message suggested that folks who'd been preparing the Secretary for that important trip, that none of them had been fired, but clearly does. But let me, I would say it's,
that's possible. There's a lot of people who can contribute to, and when a secretary travels, it's, the entire organization steps in to support his travel. So is it possible that someone who contributed in some way to his trip was part of a reduction in force? Certainly that's possible.
You also said that the, quote, reorganization affected only the domestic footprint of the State Department. But in fact, some employees were fired after arriving at their overseas assignments. Isn't that true?
So to the extent people were riffed based on the assignment that they held as of May 29th, we were not able to, some had onward assignments, but the nature of the RIF was that we had to pick a date for where people were as of May 29th. And within...
So the State Department Secretary said, nevertheless, we're going to send you and your families overseas, and their families had moved overseas, and they were riffed. Let me just turn to one last issue, because I've heard repeatedly the suggestion that all of these decisions were based on performance and that the best people were selected. Isn't it the case that in some offices you had a competition of one? Like one person competing against themselves?
So I'd be happy to go over the RIF registers with you.
I just would like an answer to my question. Isn't it the case?
There's no way for me to know when we're looking at 1,500 offices if there was. Is it likely that there was probably one office that had one or two people and another one that had 50 or 150 people? It's a big organization. Some offices.
Yeah, it's a big organization, and so when you fire 1,300 people, it's understandable that we didn't go through a deliberate process. I don't buy that, Mr. Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Regas, as you know, palladium is an incredibly important metal used across the U.S. manufacturing industry, but it is of particular importance to the production of munitions, advanced electronics, and the automobile industry. In fact, the only primary producer of palladium and platinum in the United States is in my home state of Montana. There's 3 places that mine it: Russia, South Africa, and Montana. In order to drive that mine out of business and increase the American supply chain vulnerability, the Russians have flooded the market with palladium, driving down prices and forcing Montana's Stillwater mine, which is located south of Big Timber in Columbus, Montana, a beautiful part of our state, to lay off around 700 hardworking employees. If we don't take action to curb Russian dumping and price manipulation, the mine and the important jobs it supplies will be permanently lost, and American supply chains will be all that much more vulnerable. Russian palladium is not only costing us American jobs, the irony here, it's helping fund the Russian war against Ukraine. Mr. Regas, how can the State Department work with Congress and across the administration to decrease American independence, or I should say dependence, on Russian minerals like palladium, while at the same time protecting American workers from Russian market manipulation?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think the President's talked about not necessarily this exact issue, but basically this issue generally with how we need to onshore critical supply chains for national security purposes, how he wants to streamline the permitting process so that things that used to take years, we could allow permitting for them in weeks or months, and his use of tariffs, certainly for national security purposes. And this sounds like it might be a national security issue, calling for tariffs on a critical mineral that's adversely affecting our ability to source national security related minerals. So I could see a multifaceted approach where tariffs are involved on Russian palladium, but I don't want to get out over my skis on, there's a number of other people talking about tariffs. I'll let them address that. But
thank you for that thoughtful answer. And we just want to flag it. I know we're in discussions with the White House now. The Defense Production Act might be another avenue here.
Yes.
Because they're dumping this palladium platinum into the United States market, forcing the price down. That funds the Russian efforts in Ukraine, and we're seeing Montana miners losing their jobs. We've got to act, but I want to raise the issue there to put on your radar. Second question, Mr. Regas, is regarding Central Asia. It's vitally important. It's a region that's in a tough neighborhood. It's rich in natural resources. They're surrounded by Russia, China, Iran, Afghanistan, and they're working very hard to modernize their economies and improve relationships with the United States. I visited all 5 of the presidents of those respective 5 Central Asian countries in the last 14 months, and they want to work with the United States. Unfortunately, Central Asia is still subject to very irrelevant Cold War era trade restrictions and can only trade with the United States on a waiver basis. This is the Jackson-Vanik trade restrictions. They prevent any permanent investment and have become a major hindrance to getting things done in Central Asia and to increase American prosperity and security. In order to take advantage of the possibilities for stronger partnerships between the United States and Central Asia, we must address this trade issue and frankly bring this relationship into the 21st century. Mr. Regas, I'm working with my colleagues in this committee to repeal the Jackson-Vanik restrictions. Would you commit to working with myself, my office, and the committee here to work to see these restrictions end and thereby open up a stronger relationship with Central Asia and the United States?
Certainly, Senator. It sounds like part of this reorganization, what drove it, is that we're in a post Cold War era of great power competition. We're structuring the organization to deal with the challenges that we face today, and this sounds like an item that's ripe for State Department to be able to take on.
No, I appreciate it, because this is something that we grant an annual waiver to it because it's really a relic of the Soviet days, and it's time to put this to bed. And I've been, in fact, working with Senator Murphy on a bipartisan effort here to repeal permanently the Jackson-Vanik provision.
Yeah.
Thank you. C. Senator Booker.
I'm going to defer to Senator Duckworth.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Booker. Deputy Secretary, I have to add my voice to the chorus here and express how appalled I am at how the department conducted Friday's rifts, unceremoniously firing hundreds of dedicated members of the civil service and the foreign service with only a half-hearted hand wave at the appropriate process. My office has received direct outreach from dozens of those impacted by these rifts, and they have confirmed what we suspected would happen and what members of this committee directly warned the department about. These are public servants who have made countless sacrifices to serve our nation, and the department's actions are short-sighted and frankly sloppy. I would expect better of you. That they will take an already difficult moment, and you have made it even more precarious. And I can only scratch the surface in my short time of heartbreaking personal stories that I've heard. These are public servants who are not only concerned about their livelihoods, but the impacts of our national security and our ability to respond to the next crisis. You claim that you went through a thoughtful process to execute these rifts, completely defy reality. To illustrate one example, individuals who were hired under veterans preference were riffed with no acknowledgement of their veteran status in their service summary that you included in their letters. Why should we believe that you went through a thoughtful process where you can't even check this basic box of acknowledging their veteran service? And what about the multiple examples I've heard of individuals who were riffed while on TDY overseas, who are now being put up in five-star hotels at taxpayers' expense while they struggle to get home, cut off from email access?
So thank you for the question, Senator. So the RIF procedures were done in partnership with the Office of Personnel Management. We did ask every employee in the weeks and months leading up to it to update their personnel files. And one of the challenges is there isn't a central repository.
You're blaming OPM and the employees that you riffed?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is
for your the shoddy way that you went about doing this?
The employee file is owned by the employee, so if it does not have all of their past history, if they've worked at multiple departments or agencies and their SF-50s have not been uploaded into their employee file, it's possible that some detail of their service may have been overlooked. So that's why every employee was asked to review their employee file before the reorganization to ensure that every aspect and every step of their service was included in their employee file. But if there are any issues that were overlooked, or if anyone feels that their employee file is incomplete, we'll certainly address that immediately.
It sounds like you're blaming the victim here. And the people that I've talked to did update their employee files. How do you reconcile that the Trump administration's own professional development program requires domestic service for FSOs to advance in the senior foreign service? This is something he implemented in 2017, yet you seem to exclusively target FSOs who are on domestic tours. They're on these domestic tours because President Trump in his first term said you need to do a domestic tour. As soon as they're on a domestic tour, you fire them.
So
how do you reconcile that?
Right. So as we noted, the reorganization did focus on the domestic only operation of the Department of State. It did not focus on our overseas or global footprint. We have about 14,000 foreign service officers. 10,000 of those foreign service officers serve at posts overseas, and we do have about 4,000.
Okay, you're not answering my question. How do you reconcile that?
Well, we had to be looking at the RIF. It could not fall entirely on the civil service. We had to be equitable in terms of how we address the reductions in force at the department. The vast majority of the reductions did fall on the civil service, but we did have a little over 200 foreign service officers who were impacted by the reduction in force. And like I said, that's regrettable, but when we had to eliminate offices and functions, the people who were encumbering those roles were the people who were RIFed according to the federal government rules and regulations surrounding RIFs.
But they were on domestic tour because President Trump told them they had to do it. So this is ridiculous. I'm going to go back to the subject of meeting our obligations. The cuts to EAP's team that managed U.S. engagement in ASEAN while the Secretary was at the ASEAN Ministerial is just a perfect illustration of the shoddy and foolish way that you did this. It's clear that the real winner of this move is going to be the PRC as you eliminate our expert and capacity to engage in this critical region. Under your proposed reorganization, who will manage the Mekong issue and the Mekong U.S. partnership?
So all of these functions are going to be handled at the regional bureau level. So that would be the East Asia Pacific Bureau, and then all of the country desks within those bureaus will handle the individual.
They don't have an overseas counterpart office.
I'm sorry, who doesn't have an overseas counterpart?
The Mekong U.S. Partnership does not have an overseas office.
So anything dealing with a particular region will be handled at the regional bureau.
And where is that?
The regional bureau is located in Washington, D.C., and the
deal with
the country desks are here, but their counterparts are at every post in every country.
But there's no counterpart overseas. This is the thing. You're firing people doing very important work without regard to these programs on a program that the PRC is really in the wrong on, and we had an opportunity to develop relationships. I'm astonished that you would do this to the State Department and to the national security of this country. I'm over time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Booker.
Senator Booker. Yeah, we're good.
I cannot tell you how frustrated I am listening to the answers that you've given here that to me are utterly unacceptable. You know that there's a number of us who have served in executive positions. We have governors, county executive, as Coons has said. I ran a city during a recession, cut 25% from my workforce overall. I know what it means to do a RIF right, but this has been chaos. It has been cruelty. And your answers, frankly, have just lacked decency. As if you don't care about a lot of the employees whose lives have been destroyed after years, if not decades, of service. Now, I want to be very specific. Clearly, you're not standing up for people who've dedicated their lives to this country, but I'm going to stand up for them. And so let's talk about some of these people in real life and what you've done. A technical security specialist who just moved all of his belongings to Pakistan. He was fired as he was heading there to ensure our embassies in the region were safe. Hours after the movers left his home, he was fired, leaving a massive security gap of this administration's making. On Friday, you fired rapid response consular officers who deployed to provide emergency services for Americans overseas. The rapid response officers you fired were both actively deployed, leaving one stranded in Colombia and the other in Ankara without access to their emails or phones and without plane tickets home. The cruelty continues. One of the officers was a veteran with 24 years of federal service who had helped Americans during the Afghanistan withdrawal and the Sudan evacuation that deserve better from you and the United States government for their service. At a time that there's a hot war in Ukraine and President Trump is claiming to try to foster a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, you fired the only Ukraine intelligence analyst and Russia analysts in the Intelligence and Research Bureau. You fired the executive director of the National Authority for Chemical Weapons Convention while we are trying to get the new government in Syria to locate and destroy remaining stockpiles of chemical weapons that threaten the security of that region and us. You fired human trafficking experts, including everyone with human trafficking experience in the Middle East, North Africa, and South and Central Asia, as if that is not an urgent crisis amongst humanity and for this nation. Apart from the national security implications of all of these firings, despite the cruel way that you guys executed them, the human toll is also staggering. One of the human trafficking experts you fired, showing the level of cruelty of your actions, has a wife who was just fired by USAID. She's pregnant. And now he just got fired as well. Two people trying to start their family with no income and now even their health insurance in limbo, who gave years of service to this country. You even fired all the staff at the Office of Casualty Assistance who are charged with repatriating fallen State Department personnel and their families, including those working on behalf of employees killed in the Benghazi attacks. We have a solemn and sacred duty to bring home bodies of American citizens who die while serving their countries and helping their help their families. It's a sacred obligation. Every major corporation I know we've talked about business sector, knows the most valuable thing they can do is get a pipeline of talent and personnel. I've talked to CEOs who've told me they spend between 25% and a third of their time recruiting talent, but despite telling us that the recruitment office would face no cuts, on Friday you fired the entire recruitment division, lying to us and eliminating that pipeline of talent. To the civil service and foreign officers who are watching this right now, hoping they can get some justification for the chaos you've created, for the cruelty you've put into place, for the lack of decency, I'm going to tell those folks right now that we are going to stand up for each and every one of those folks and fight for them at a time that China is doubling down on their investments in diplomatic corps, trying to fill every void that we create. You are devastating our corps, hurting Americans, undermining our sacred mission as well. And again, I don't trust you, Mr. Regas. Yesterday you said no one at Council Affairs would be fired. That's false. Over 100 Consular Affairs officers were fired. Again, you said no one with overseas assignments would be fired. That also is not true. I have examples of employees riffed all over this country who've had orders in hands. And we were told no diplomatic security agents would be fired. And again, not true. We are the United States Senate. We have an obligation for oversight, and you showed over the House hearing that even your statements lack veracity. I'm telling you right now, we are in a crisis in this country. If you won't come here and represent facts, and to demonstrate that cruelty, to demonstrate the level of chaos and lack of decency of this administration, all of these cuts are being done in the name of saving taxpayers' money, but we're not doing that. We literally are giving tax cuts to billionaires and racking up the biggest deficits in my lifetime under this leadership that does not have fiscal responsibility. And the best demonstration of that is allowing millions of pounds or thousands of pounds of food that were supposed to save the lives of thousands of human beings, paid for by taxpayers, to spoil on docks. How is that in any way human decency? How is that in any way showing what we stand for as a country, that we would rather watch food spoil on the docks, taxpayer money absolutely wasted, while children around this world are dying because of your inaction and that of your agency? Sir, you have not been truthful. You are showing a lack of decency to people who've given decades of service, veterans. You've upended families. This is not the way we operate. It is not the decency that they deserve. And I will stand up and fight you in every way to make sure that the people you have hurt get from this country what they deserve: respect and honor. Thank you.
Senator Shaheen.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, you may.
I am deeply distressed by everything you just said.
I'm distressed by everything you've done, sir. I've watched you lie to this committee. I've watched you lie on the House side.
You did not.
I'm sorry, sir.
If you were here when I addressed Senator Merkley on that consular affairs statement, I told him immediately after that, the next sentence after that in my House testimony,
what about the other lies that I've said? I've pointed out. What about the other lies?
Diplomatic.
You want to go through them one by one?
Diplomatics, sir. Mr. Chairman, can I respond to the question?
You may respond.
We did not let go any diplomatic security personnel that were engaged in law enforcement functions. We did not let go any consular affairs personnel who were engaged in adjudicating passports. Mr. Chairman, can I answer the question, please? This is outrageous.
Senator Brooke, please let...
Sir, what is outrageous is your behavior.
So I will tell you, we gave humanitarian exceptions.
Senator, please let Mr. Regas respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We let individuals who are RIF, by the way, they're still on payroll, they're still getting pay and benefits, civil servants for the next 60 days, foreign service officers for the next 120 days, and then the other individuals who had requested compassionate exceptions because of medical or family issues were granted. And I can tell you that is in stark contrast to what I experienced when I was the acting director of the Office of Personnel Management at the end of the first Trump administration, when we requested of the incoming Biden administration that appointees who were pregnant, who had babies, Some in the NICU, we said, could they please, because they were legally entitled to have family and medical leave for 12 weeks, sir.
Is to blame Biden. I've heard this time and time again. Is to blame Biden.
You've never heard this before, sir, because it's never been mentioned in the congressional record.
You're trying to delay, you're trying to deny, and you're trying to denigrate this committee by not telling the truth. Sir, I want to enter the record literally an impeachment of what he just said. May I enter into the record this document demonstrating that he did indeed fire people who were in charge of doing technical work for the security of our people overseas. You lied to this committee.
I did not, sir.
And I'd like to enter this into the record.
Okay, just a minute. Senator Booker, you are allowed to enter it on the record.
Thank you very much.
So if we could, Mr. Regas, please respond, and then we're going to move on.
I pointed out 4 factual errors where you lied to this committee. I'm happy to listen to you go through each one.
As I've said repeatedly,
Senator Booker,
in this
thank
committee, sir.
you. I just want to allow Mr. Regas to respond, and then Senator Shaheen then has a couple more questions.
Thank you.
We'll wrap up.
As I've said repeatedly during this committee, and maybe you weren't here to hear that testimony, obviously people were let go from their jobs. It's a reduction in force. We had 13 people who were let go. That does not mean the function that they performed was necessarily eliminated. These functions that we wanted to move forward were carried on either in a combined bureau or in another office where those redundant functions were carried out. We said diplomatic security that was conducting law enforcement, there were no reductions in that law enforcement function. Consular affairs folks who were adjudicating passports, who were doing the customer service work that we want to see continue, were not reduced or eliminated. People who were in domestic positions is where these reductions in force were done.
But, sir, he's contradicting his own territory. You said that's regrettable, that there were at least 200 people that you at least showed some shred of decency.
I'm saying it's regrettable. Look, no one wants.
So you've made mistakes.
No, I'm saying,
sir. So you have made mistakes.
What I'm expressing, sir,
you're literally saying you've made no mistakes.
Senator Booker, thank you. I want to, Mr. Regas. Clearly, this is going to go back and forth.
Right.
I'd like you to maybe respond maybe in 30 seconds, and we'll have Senator Shaheen.
I think you should respond to questions for the record, sir.
Thank you.
I'm happy to respond
on
to
the record.
Look. Look, no one wants to lay someone off. I don't think we take any joy in laying people off or any kind of reduction in force, but we have to do what's best for the mission. We have to do what's best for the organization. The department has grown by 20,000 people since 2008. We're literally we let go 1,300 people. Every single one of those is hard for those individuals, for their families. You know, I've experienced unemployment in my life. I know what that's like. It's not pleasant for anyone, but we have to put the mission first, and we have to make sure the critical functions we want to execute are going to be done, and they're going to be done with respect to taxpayers in the United States. So
I find that insulting, demeaning, degrading to the people whose lives you've upended unjustifiably.
Yeah.
To put yourself out there.
Senator Shaheen, next round of question.
Mr. Regas, as you can see, there are strong feelings on the part of this committee about what's happened at the State Department. I think one of the things that would have helped with any reorganization would have been to engage this committee, which is our oversight, responsibility, and function. And the fact is, as I said in my opening statement, this reorganization has occurred without appropriate notification, without appropriate engagement on the part of Congress. And no wonder people are upset. But I want to go back to the food assistance issue, because you acknowledge that what we don't want to do is destroy food that has been purchased, that is available for people. We don't want to let it spoil. We don't want to destroy it. So can I ask that you have an inventory of what food is still out there waiting to be distributed?
Certainly.
I know there is oil in Houston in a warehouse that is going to reach its expiration date within months, and if we don't get it out, it's also going to be spoiled. I'm sure there is food in other places around the world, actually, because we know there was food in Djibouti that was going out. So can we ask that you provide that to this committee within the next week, and with a plan for how it's going to get distributed? And if the State Department doesn't have the officials to distribute it, let's give it to other aid organizations so that they can distribute it, so it's not going to waste and people are getting the benefit not only from what the American taxpayers paid for, but for people who are desperate for food, and we know that there are places all over the world where people are desperate for that food. Will
Certainly.
you commit to that?
Of course, certainly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Shaheen. Well, that wraps up the hearing. Sincere thank you to Mr. Regas for providing us with the benefit of his testimony. For the information of members, the record will remain open until the close of business tomorrow, July 17th. We ask the witness to respond as promptly as possible. Your responses will also be made a part of the record. With the thanks of the committee, the hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you, Mr.